This video is what I would say to my 20-year-old self if I could sum all the stories and lessons up into a few short minutes. This would be it. My 20s happened in phases. There were the first 3 years when I was still in school, and then when I started working, I switched jobs every 2 years, and I would label every couple of years as a phase. And I still remember the day when I realized that I didn't want to be an accountant anymore. So in university, we do all these networking events, and sometimes we get the chance to go to accounting firms. And I did. I went to an accounting firm, and like everyone had a drink in their hand, and we were talking to like senior partners, trying to network and make connections. Thinking back now, it just feels ludicrous that I thought that just by going to those events, I would somehow get my career figured out. But what hit the final straw for me was when I walked into a conversation with a senior partner, and I was like, "Wow, how are you doing?" And he was like, "Yeah, life is good, life is busy." Yeah, and then I was like, "Wow, you're a senior partner, you must be really busy." And he said, "Yeah, I am. I mean, in my first few years as an accountant, I had to go through a divorce. Things were tough back then, but now life is good. Like now when I go on business trip, I can take my family with me and everything's great." And I know I'm supposed to hear that everything does get better, right? But what I heard was, "Oh my God, the guy got a divorce because of this job." I never want to get a divorce because of a job. I never want to get divorced, period, right? And so that was the moment when I was like, maybe I should consider something else. Like if I already don't like the subject and I have to sacrifice so much for this job, then I should probably go do something else. And it was at that time when one of my friends was studying education. And I thought, all right, if I can't do business, I can teach it. So I did. I became a teacher. And at the ripe age of 23, I finished my degree in secondary education, in business education. And I also have a degree in accounting and finance, which helped with the degree in business education. And I flew. I just left Canada. I felt like I had been too dependent on my parents for a living in the first 20 years of my life, and so I decided to just fly, and I left, and I went to China to teach. And I think the biggest lesson from this phase is the amount of time that I wasted trying to learn something that I knew I didn't want to learn. And oftentimes I would find myself in my early 20s, 20 to 23, escaping from the work instead of finding work that I enjoyed. And this would come in the form of video games. This would come in the form of going out. But had I just found something that I enjoyed, I probably could have gone a lot deeper into it. And so next thing I know, I'm in China and in a city that I've never been to. And I didn't know back then, but I actually definitely got lowballed. I was getting paid probably like 30 grand a year to work at a job that I probably spent 16 hours a day on. I mean, the vacations were nice, but those first 2 years, I remember falling asleep at night with tests on my chest because I had just been so tired marking them. But those 2 years were definitely the 2 years when I would say I learned the most, because once you go into the workplace, you realize that you don't really know anything. And working is the thing that actually gets you to learn, not going to school. You spend 40K or more on a university education, and it's the actual work that you learn the most from. And so when I first went abroad, I thought I'd be back in Canada in 2 years. In fact, I had a little bit of wishful thinking. I thought to myself, man, mom and dad did so much for me in my first 20 years. I want to provide for them. And so I'm going to spend these 2 years away, and in every moment that I am not working, which turned out to be not that much, I was always working, I wanted to start a business, and I wanted to start some kind of online thing that would eventually make more money than my teaching job, at which point I would quit my teaching job and just go back to Canada and do that full time. That obviously didn't work out, and that led to a lot of bad decisions. And the reason it led to a lot of bad decisions was because it was the first time I had a paycheck. And it was the first time, it wasn't much, but a few $1,000s a month coming into the bank account when you're in a part of the world that doesn't require that much money to live well. That's a dangerous combination when we factor in that I was a risk taker that had no idea how much money was worth, that was new into what we call the real world. I thought I could buy my way to success. But the only thing I bought my way to was other people's success because I gave them the money. And so when I was 20, by the time I was 25, I had changed schools to a school that didn't require as much work to be at, but paid a little bit more. And that was the year when I probably spent $30,000 just trying to start a business, and in courses and in mentorships. And thinking back, now I realize how ridiculous that is. And so if you are somebody that is in your early 20s and you're thinking about starting some kind of business, and you're thinking about, oh yeah, before I start this business, I should probably pay somebody to teach me, like for some kind of online course. And here's the thing you have to know with education and online courses. There's a lot out there, and there's one question you have to ask before you buy any paid education program. And in retrospect, I should have known because I was a teacher. And at any school I've worked at, the school and the teachers will try their best to help the students pass, which means there's a criteria for passing. Yeah. And so can you imagine if all university was a bunch of lectures, no accountability, and no measurement of whether or not you passed or failed, right? And if you're falling behind, there's nowhere to go to for help, right? That's what most online courses are, right? And it's even worse than university because there are prerequisites to get into university, right? Like if you go and get a physics degree, you probably already studied some sort of physics in high school and you got a good mark. And so that was kind of a leading indicator for the idea that you do well in physics. None of that exists for business, right? Like getting a high mark in university, having a 4.0 GPA has no relationship to whether you will succeed in business or not. And so most business courses, online courses by gurus, don't have any accountability. Once they take your money, it's in their pocket. And if you don't succeed from their knowledge, that's on you, right? And so after all these years, I think the biggest lesson I learned from all of these online courses and programs that teach you different business models is if you can't get a level of success on your own, then you won't be able to with their courses either. Like, it's a lot easier to get to $1,000 a month in some kind of business, in some kind of craft, and then optimize with a course than it is to go from 0 to $1,000 a month, all reliant on a course when you don't have the right beliefs, you might not have the right habits, you might not have the right skills. When all of that is happening, knowledge does not help at all. Yeah. And so by the time I was 26, I was pretty disheartened. I spent way too much money. The way I think about it is I spent 2 years volunteering. Like my first 2 years working, I was volunteering. And that's how much money I lost by the time I was 26. And so by the time I was 27, I was working at my third school. And that was also the time when I met my now wife. And having someone that depends on you and that you depend on really forced me to think for the family, become less risky, be more risk averse, and think more carefully about what I was doing with my money. That was also around the time when I decided to buy a apartment pre-sale back in Canada, because I thought, why not? I was gonna get a little bit of help from my parents, no shame in that, and I was going to put together the other part of the down payment together myself. And so I did some calculations on my salary and decided that I would spend the next 3 years trying to save $100,000, which I did. So I couldn't spend any money during that time, because if I didn't save the $100,000, I wouldn't have the apartment. And so that was a phase in my life when I really could only do one thing, and that was focus on my craft of doing good work at work. And believe it or not, that was also when the time my income grew the most. Because when I focused at work and I got good at work, people notice. And people will ask you to do more things. And for me, that was good because it meant I could make a better impact. It meant that I had larger bargaining power when I wanted some kind of raise, when I wanted to negotiate additional responsibilities and more money to add to my paycheck. And that was the time when I realized my next lesson, which was all good things take time. And if we can focus on doing one thing for a really long time and get really good at it, then the market will reward me for it. Now, at my current job, my 8th year abroad, I thought I was going to go back in 2, but now it's my 8th year. I don't have $1 million like I thought I would, but I did triple my income. So that was good. I was making $30,000 in the beginning, and now it's tripled. And my job is still pretty much the same. And so I'm getting paid a higher wage just because I'm able to do a good job now. And I still think I have lots of room to improve. I'm much more willing now to actually put the work in because I've seen the results of putting the work in now, right? I put work in my job, I tripled my income. If I could just put my work in the whole online business thing, I just know if I have a 10-year horizon, 20-year horizon, instead of a 2-year horizon, I know something will happen and I know it's going to be good. So that's where I'm at today. I'm not a millionaire, but if I were to sum up the key lessons that I had in my 20s, number 1, having someone and having that person in your life will inevitably force you to make better decisions with your finances and with your time. Number 2, doing one thing for a very long time is what gives a competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage is what gives you pricing power in the markets. And number 3, good decisions are made when you think long term. If you just be patient and you give yourself a longer time horizon and you just keep doing one thing, things will work out. But if you have a short time horizon, that's a recipe for poor decision making.